So here we are. It is May 24th, 2013. Is that possible? May 24th, 2013. And here we are in Boiling Springs. And Lana Momsheimer is interviewing Joe Burns for the LGBT History Project. Joe, do you agree to be interviewed?
Yes, certainly I did.
Okay.
And we're very happy to be this over.
Good. And we're going to do a little bit different kind of interview this time because Joe's real well prepared and knows where he wants to start. So, why don't you tell us what you want to tell us?
Okay. So what I wanted to talk about first was a little bit of the beginning. Okay, I came out in 1967 and became active in 1969. And I want to make that clear, that was a very different time. And it was also the beginning of what effectively became the gay liberation movement in that period. And I'd like to talk about that because I think it's very distinctly different. And it's the period that I describe, and it's the period in which I lived. And it fit neatly between two periods. It fit neatly between 1969, when in fact the Stonewall riots occurred, and 80, when I went away. And what happened in 80, of course, is that we began to have the onset of AIDS, and that whole, what is the gay cancer scare thing, and just at the point at which I left the state. So it was a good breaking point. After this, I always say that after the first AIDS case, everything simply became irrelevant. Everything that had been gay liberation simply went away. And it had to, because we had to address this incredible question of survival of AIDS and how to get through this and how to address it and how to get people educated. This just wiped it out. So it was a very different time in 67. When I came out, I went to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. My sister took me there, as a matter of fact, and ostensibly I was going to go to school. I had been to Moravian College prior to this, and I didn't graduate. And so I went back and I told everybody I was going to go back to school, and went out there in time for school. I did not matriculate, as a matter of fact. I was away from home, which is what I wanted to be. I was 27 years old. I was born in 1940, so I was 27 then. I wanted very much to be away and be my own person. Didn't have a way to do that. And so I kind of used this excuse to get out. It was fine. Whenever I didn't go to school, the next day I went down to the bookstore and bought all the copies that I could find on anything about to do with homosexual. Now, I had done that before, so this was the first time I had done it. It's just that they had an excellent bookstore, Moravian bookstore in Bethlehem that I liked very much. And I was able to find books there. And I wouldn't have expected that because it was a church bookstore called the Moravian Church Bookstore. And it had them.
Stop 1 minute. I'll give you the cue again. We're getting in trouble here.
My fault. Sorry.
No, nobody's fault. These are just difficult to work with. Let me see. I'm going to try to put it right on your shirt.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Well, everything.
I think that probably, then you won't fool with it, for one thing. I think, does the sound okay now? Mm-hmm. Okay, were you hearing anything coming out of that rubbing?
Oh, no.
Good. Oh, good. Okay, so Moravian bookstore.
The next thing I did was the next day. I don't. Let's not even talk about the particular timing of it. I went to the library and tried to look up the Mattachine Society. I had no idea how to find it. Got a librarian, and she found that for me, the Mattachine Society in New York. Now, I knew that it existed because in '63, I believe it was, which was 4 years beforehand, I had seen a program with Mike Wallace that he was interviewing homosexuals, and he in fact showed the door of the Mattachine Society in New York. I wanted to be there. I wanted very much. That's all I knew about it. I had that. That was my key. I knew something I wouldn't know I wanted to do. So the first thing I did, of course, was join Mattachine Society in New York. Was the West Coast was one in Los Angeles. That was the big organization on the West Coast. Mattachine, not Mattachine, but SIR in San Francisco was founded in '65, I believe, and there's another big organization out there. So if I couldn't do anything else, I gave them my money. In Philadelphia, there was there were three organizations. It was the Homophile Action League. Homophile Action League. This was Barbara Giddings.
Mm-hmm.
And then there were two others. There was the Janus Society, which I knew about, which was operated by a fellow by the name of darn, I was going to forget his name. Leave it for the moment. I will think of his name. He operated Drum, which was actually a physique magazine. And what the thing about that was, it was for leather guys. But it was the only thing that I knew of that really had news about what was happening in terms of a movement, what was happening within the gay community. Was one of the few things that I knew about. The Janus Society did not have a newsletter that I knew of. The other organization was same address, League of. It was a legal thing, but I can't.
Homophile
right
Action
off
League,
the top of my head, I can't remember. No, it was a legal fund of some sort. At any rate, it had the same address. Now that before I went. Okay, first I went to Philadelphia, went to the address, went up to the second floor, and it turned out that this person was effectively a pornographer with drawing Drum, and that's what was clearly, when you walked in the place, it became very clear this is what it was, because there was shells in back and all this pornography. But he was an important part of that whole scene. So those were basically what was around. Of course, New York Mattachine was very important, and that was the one that I really considered my home.
Pornography was pretty important, wasn't it?
Oh, very much so, very much so. It helped, especially when we realized. I went to. One of the points about my going to the libraries was that I went to the 5 libraries in that Bethlehem's area, and that this was Moravian College, Lehigh University, Muhlenberg College, Lafayette College, and St. Francis de Sales, a little Catholic college off in Allentown. There were no books that I could find in the college catalog, card catalog, that started with the word homosexual. There were no books. There were no books on gay, which was a new term to me. I didn't know gay when I started, actually, and I'm not sure when I was even comfortable with the term gay. That was foreign to me for a long time. It took me a while to get used to that whole term, and I didn't know it until I kind of moved away and began to learn it when I was away from home, that it wasn't homosexual, and I began to value the difference between homosexual and gay. Homosexual was the old word. It was the word that was laden very heavily with all the freight of people could put onto it. Lesbian was that kind of term to me too, and it is to this day. And I've never been comfortable with lesbian because it's always carried that old freight. But so gay was what I know, and gay is what I called myself all this time, and it has always been a term that for me included women, and I think it did largely for the people who were then involved, that they included women, but they did it under the gay term, and that was an important distinction to them. The movement, especially then, was in fact male. There was no question about it. There was a separate group in the Daughters of Bilitis in San Francisco, who were very important in their own right. Barbara Giddings had been editor of the latter, and when she came north and east to do this other business in Philadelphia, she was no longer the editor. That I don't think she was the editor, but she was certainly the most prominent person. So I came forth in this very male atmosphere. There's no question about the fact that it really, really was. It stayed that way for a long time. I brought a couple of books with me that I just want to read, not just to show, and not necessarily refer to, that were about gay liberation. Under the Rainbow was written by a person who was there and in a collective. This was also another person who was at the same place. These guys were in New York. That's a very different experience. In New York is where they really were able to do it. Moved off to a collective, lived their lifestyle, very, very free. And they were talking about the fact that we are so free that we can't even relate to the rest of you. We don't know what's we think all we have to do is walk out the door and be ourselves, And they thought they were going to change the world. Well, obviously it didn't happen, and they got very frustrated. But they got frustrated and forgot the rest of us too, and had to pick that up. That boy, we're living our lifestyle that's so free that never has been before, because we have been out of contact. Remember, we couldn't contact each other. That world in '69 or in '67 was a very isolated place. And I was particularly isolated. I came from a hometown of 20,000, 30,000 people. I didn't know anybody that was gay until just a little short time before I left. Finally met my first, really solid gay person 10 years after I should have. Okay, I'm talking now we're 27. I had my first sexual experience when I was 13. Didn't have any more until I was 23. Had to leave home to have them. And then I didn't have any more until I was 27. So I actually went away and learned about it. There was a gay bar that I knew of in town, in Allentown, called Rubes. And that was another place that I headed. That was another part of my education, was reaching out to Rubes and the gay bar. The only outlet that I knew about was, and for many reasons that was important for to find people who were actually gay. You could trust them. You could trust them there. Anywhere else, you had to establish by various means that somebody was gay, that you could talk to them, that you could come out to them, that you could solicit them, all kinds of things. A very difficult process. So gay bars really facilitated that process, but it was the only place that was really that kind of safe. Nowhere in rural America was that true. Okay, and it certainly wasn't true for me in where I was in Butler, Pennsylvania.
I want to do his hands more. He's using his hands when he talks.
Yeah, I was trying to lower it.
I don't think we
Am
lower that.
Am I wondering too much?
No, not at all. This is
It's the lowest
perfect.
we can go.
We just
Let
want
me
to
bring the
you're
camera
talking
back
with your hands,
a
and
little.
we want to get that.
Okay.
Okay.
And there's still a little bit of static in the background.
In the mic.
Yeah.
Oh.
Here,
We got it.
just talk for a minute.
Since we have paused.
And let me.
It's probably down here somewhere.
See, I'm even hearing your papers.
Yeah, I know.
Your notes are probably way too extensive, but
Okay.
that's great.
All
If
right.
you want to keep writing.
Let me get another pen too.
Oh, yeah. Because Anne has dozens of pens
It's
inside.
going to be the answer
I'm
here.
sorry, I am up.
There never is one, as far as
I know, and this
able to
probably, I should
discover.
have done some, I did this for a reason. This is self-mockery.
Ah!
I'll tell you why, we'll find out another time.
What in the world
Why
was
wear
that?
hoodies, why wear hoodies.
By the way, we just mentioned, if you want to stop at any time, you just say stop. I mean, this is all editable, so
Yeah, right, that's what I'm,
the important thing is for us to
I remember
get the
that.
stuff and get it comfortably.
Right. Just give me one
Well,
second.
there's two things that people tell me that I do. It's subjects too quickly, which I feel like I'm doing right now, and two, that I just simply wonder. I just
Well,
don't say
you started out giving us background,
Yeah.
and that's what you're working yourself through, your first
should've-
years as being an out
Should have
person.
stopped this. Okay.
This is a question we would have asked.
Absolutely, I would hope so, because it was, as I said, it was a very, very different time. It wasn't the organization of gay life that I knew and that I experienced, and this was even after I came out, was that there were circles of people, circles of males in particular, who were governed by a queen bee. And the queen bee was the person who really was the social leader of that particular group. And there might be any number of people. It may be 2 or 3 people. It might be 5 or 6. It might be 8 or 9. It might, and there were secondary groups. There were groups that were associated. But there was a queen bee, and they were a very important part of gay life. They were also the leader. They were almost, what happened with most of those groups is when you had a party, you did drag. This was the big deal. And these guys were especially drag leaders. They were very good at drag. They were very funny, very bitchy men, very, very sarcastic. And one of the wonders to me, and one of the wonderful things about gay liberation, is all that sarcasm went away. And I really, really wanted that to go away. I mean, that was just horrible to feel the bitterness and the sarcasm, and everybody was merry, and it wasn't nice. It was a put down. It was always meant to be a put down. but that's what you were supposed to call each other. Well, of course, I never was, and I didn't feel as if I was married, and didn't permit that about myself. So that's another part of my male liberation, is that for me it has always been on the male side of things, and yet I think that one of the losses of male liberation has been that we didn't fight for our real cousins, but they fought for us. Okay, we have never done what we should have for them. In terms of the people who have really been out, have been the ones with no choice ever. They've been too family. They've been too recognizable that they simply had there was no closet for them ever to go to. But when you go to gay groups, everybody was male. Everybody was straight acting, straight looking, and it's as if the other people didn't exist. They existed when we went to New York to the gay parade. Then these people were having a great time on the street, acting out, doing whatever they could, and the importance of that is that they really, when it came to the revolution, they took the center stage. They had no place to hide, so they were out there. When the Stonewall occurred, it was the femmes who were out there. It was the people who had no choice who were out there doing the fighting and doing the teasing and the cups and all that kind of stuff. They had great personality doing it. They did wonderful things. And but you could hardly ever find a transvestite in a gay group. Barry was an exception. That Barry's always had that. Remember, Jeannie? I forgot the name of the girl. Julie it was. Remember Julie? Yeah. At Barry's. He kept the transvestite in the house, and who was not a very good transvestite, as a matter of fact. It was always a question to me. If she would have been, I've known transvestites, and she would have been one of the ones who wasn't. Okay, and not a transvestite. She wouldn't have been a good transsexual. She wouldn't have been a good transsexual at all. She wouldn't have been a choice. She wouldn't have been my choice to give a change to. I think she was too young, too inexperienced, and not the right mindset. I've known both, and she was not. Okay, but you just don't see those kind of people. They were hidden. They were put away. They were slapped down when they did come up. The people used to go to the parades and say, "Look at those people. They're taking all the publicity." Well, hell, we should have been fighting for them. We should have been right out front with them, and that's just been just like our women. We really kind of left our women behind. So we'll go forward now to this distinction between old groups. About the Mattachine was an old guard, and the Mattachine, the name of the Mattachine was to describe a group of medieval jesters who spoke from behind the mask, and they could tell the truth. Okay, and that's what the Mattachine was. It was masking, so that only the people who were supposed to be out were the leaders. They could speak for the rest of us. They could speak for all the people who were behind them, who had to stay in the closet, but they could be the forceful voices. And that was the whole point of Mattachine, is to get out there and be in the front.
And you were a member of Mattachine?
And I was a member of Mattachine, but a very distant member. And we're talking about the fact that it was in New York, and I couldn't get there. I mean, I did. And I went to Philadelphia. I went to New York. I went to the door. I met Dick Leish, and it was then the executive director of Mattachine. Went in, met it personally, because it was very important to me. I came out, speaking of Dick Leish, I came out during that same very early period, when I was still doing the business with the libraries and so on, I saw Barbara Giddings in the newspaper, and it was just her name. I didn't even think it was her picture, but her name was in the Philadelphia paper, in Philadelphia Inquirer, the morning paper. Is that what the one? Yeah. As being an out lesbian. Well, I just thought, my God, if she can do that, I can do that. So that's when I came out. That's when I decided that that's what I was going to do. Is whatever else, I was not going to hide anymore. If she could do it, then I had enough strength to do it. And that was an important decision to me, I think, and that's the one that I always felt after that. The other thing about Mattachine that I really want to talk about for just a moment, the reason that I was so attracted to them, and I don't have the exact quote, unfortunately, but it was something about we are putting ourselves forward as a light, to light a candle, so that those who follow us in the dark or immersed in the dark to the light have somebody holding their hand. And that was so important to me, to feel that there was somebody out there, and that's all I wanted to be. I just wanted to be the person who, if you had to reach, I was going to be there, or something. I didn't know, but that's been that very simple philosophy. I think has been my gay activism. It's been very personal. It doesn't mean much to me to give speeches or to outreach to heterosexuals. There's always been a debate in my mind as to whether we want to bother with them. Quite frankly, why we wouldn't just go off and lead our lives when we can do this very, very happy thing in our own space. We can go off and we can do it. We can forget them. We can walk away from them. We didn't, but we was often tempted, and I think that you find that in everybody else's. Everybody's asked the same question. These guys, kind of said, "We're doing our thing. Why should we bother? Why should we educate all those other people?"
So
Mattachine.
now you're in Philadelphia.
No, yeah, okay. I was just in Philadelphia. I wasn't in Philadelphia. I was always at home. I was always in Bethlehem, Allentown.
Okay.
And I traveled
So
to
you
these
traveled
places.
to
Yeah, I traveled to these
Philadelphia,
places. Yes. And because I really wanted to get there to see, just to be there, to see what's this thing about. Let me, if I can't, I can give them my money, I can give them my dues or whatever. If I can't participate, I can at least do that. Mattachine started in about sometime in '69, and I think it might have been March, possibly earlier. I got a letter from Mattachine that said there will be someone in your area who wants to start a group. Okay, and that was all they said. Now, it wasn't dated letter, and there's a reason why it wasn't dated. But so I don't know exactly when it was, and I don't know exactly when I knew it as soon as I got the person's letter, who happened to be a fellow by the name of Ron Seeds, who was the founder of Lehigh Ho. Got a call. Had sent. They used his name. He allowed them. They allowed him to use their mailing list. Is what I'm trying to say. To make this mailing. If I want to start a group out in Pennsylvania, be the first one to be outside of the West Coast, the East Coast. It would be in a smaller community than a major city. Hub. Homofied Union of Boston started at the same time, the same way. It was a person who was out of Boston and had gone to Mattachine and said, "I want to start a group." So Mattachine, out of Mattachine was the biggest thing on the East Coast in terms of names and numbers, so they allowed them to use their name. We got started. The first time there were only 4 of us. I think the first meeting that we had, that Ron was able to get, people responded. 3 of us were members, and one was an old guy, 50-year-old man. I always like to tell Herman's story because a 50-year-old man had never been out before, and he got out, and he just bloomed. I mean, he just went everywhere, went to all the baths, and just had such a great time, and died about 2 or 3 years later. But I was so happy for him that he was able to really experience that, and he just blabbed about it all the time, about how wonderful it was to get out and meet people and so on. He was a part of it. And I think that he was the one who initially got where we met at, when we met on this strange little country road out in the place. I think we're thinking like they're going to come and arrest us if we don't do this hiding or something like that. It's just the feeling of it, because we were so remote. And I don't think that was what we really intended, but at the same time, it's what we really intended. We really kind of felt that, because we weren't sure about how safe were we doing this thing about all these homosexuals getting together to start a group. We didn't know. So we met. About 13 or 14 people started that day. I don't remember how many people were there, but I know that there were, when we left, there were 13 people who said, "We will begin Lehigh Ho. Yes, we will come and join your organization." And that was the beginning of Lehigh Ho. And matter of fact, it was a very distinct group. The homophile organizations were organizations like Mattachine that did service to people. That they did very peculiar service to people. At that time, the very special question that we wanted to organize around was, what did you check the box or not? This was Vietnam. This was 1969. And the big question was, if you're using drafts, if you're going to join up to the draft, do you want to check the box and say I'm homosexual? Because it has consequences. It has consequences about employment for the rest of your life. It has consequences if you join the service and then are found out. Then you can't get benefits. You'll be thrown out of the service and you can't get benefits. All kinds of things. It's a very important question, and lots of people were asking, who weren't going to. That was one of the questions that was very important. Lehigh-Ho was formed to answer. I didn't happen to be involved with that. The guy Ron was involved with that. Ron took the mailbox and I answered all that correspondence. And answered all those questions, basically. I became the newsletter editor and started the newsletter. The first newsletter has ever been done by somebody who simply said, "I'll do it," put in with some mailings that he was going to do, and got the first newsletter. This next month, then I took over as newsletter editor. Said, "I will do this." So the next thing that I did, and this is one of my, if I have pride as a gay, this was one of my big prides, was that I gave a library to Lehigh-Ho of about 150 books. So this is between 67 and 69. I really gathered a lot of books that were hard to find because there were not that many books. It was not that big an issue. Psychopathy, homosexuality was still a text that was a very important book that my God had written in 1874 or something. I don't know what year it was. The title in Latin, and you ordered and talked about it under that name because there wasn't another. Never did get another one that I knew of. But it was very hard to find. There was almost nothing positive either. We talked about the fact that there were so many negative people. I had a book that had been written in 1952, I think it was, by Edmund Burglar.
Oh.
Did you know this book?
No, yeah, I do.
It was the most evil diatribe I have ever seen in my life. It was just horrendous, and it had gone through in the years by the time I got it, had gone through 16 editions. So I picked up the 16th edition of this book that had been printed in 52, and I'm reading it in maybe 66, 67, somewhere. I'm not sure when I got it quite, but it was the first thing you have to work through. Is this? This is not me. This is not me. This is not me. This is not me. And he identified us as people who were self-destructive. We were criminals. We couldn't do anything else. We would have to be self-destructive because we were doing all these evil things, and it was all his judgment, of course. Well, you have to work this through, and it was very, very hard. And there were books like that. Everybody was asking, why are we homosexual? It's a big question. Well, you just finally throw that one out the window, but it's a long time working it through. So I amassed.
So it wasn't difficult for you to see that didn't describe you.
Oh no. It does become. Self-loathing has always been a very big issue for us. I mean, there's no question about the fact that when gay liberation is and starts, and even today, our own inhibitions come from within ourselves. So much of the time, we have a kind of a not self-loathing, but I don't know what this is a term for it, like homophobic. We are homophobic about ourselves, and we don't know it, and we don't know how to break it, because we are. So we think we are experts on it. And in fact, we've internalized so much that, and I realized that in my own life many times that I couldn't make my own breakthrough. I could give this. I was doing this almost for the next generation because it wasn't something I could quite handle myself. I couldn't quite reach it myself. It wasn't fair. It wasn't true. But it was true too, because there were inhibitions that I felt that I knocked up against that hurt me, and that I couldn't overcome. As a result of it, one of them was, for instance, and we kind of talked about this recently, because I'm still a little phobic about telephones, And one of the reasons I'm phobic about telephones is because when we were doing our thing way back when, we were trying to get a conference together, and we couldn't. The first place, the hotel turned us down. That's another story. I don't want to tell it here. Outside of the fact that we had gone, after that we went to a lot of camps, to the Poconos, and we went to college, etc.
This is Lehigh-Ho?
No, this was the caucus. This would be later on, and that's why I don't want to get into the stories. I don't want to miss my stories. But that's why I felt that was an example of how I felt my oppression was, because I really got hurt by that whole process. I would call up, people would laugh at you. It hurt me badly, and to this day I'm phobic about telephones, in part because of that, because it's an instrument that I don't trust very well. And I don't like to call people. I don't like to make demands. I don't like to, and I feel that telephone's out of control. And that's why I like to write, for instance. And I don't like interviews because I want to write it. I can control when I'm ready. Back to the Lehigh-Ho and homophile groups. So they did two things. They did social outreach, education, were their two big deals. And you will find this consistently about homophile organizations. Organizations call themselves homophile. Homophiles in Williamsport called themselves an educational group. Formed years after 1960s. There were always homophiles of Penn State, homophiles of Columbia, homosexual students of Columbia, were kind of old guard in a certain sense, and they had a different feeling for themselves. What happens in '69 when we have the Stonewall is that we suddenly have this fight, and everybody wants to come out. This is the big deal. The old guard are those who want to stay in the closet. The Mattachine Societies, the people who were very cautious about we're gonna do this incrementally. Boy, they said we're going to come out, and there was a magazine in New York that said out, scared the hell out of people, because that's what they demanded. You come out of the closet and you live this free life. Well, of course, the young responded, and the older people didn't. And there was a division in Lehigh-Ho when we were first confronted with that issue. So they stayed what they were. They stayed educational. Gay liberation wanted to do a different thing. They were very much more out, very much more political, much less concerned. And we never did. We never did an outreach. We never had a Secrets Bureau. I mean, we may have appeared in a few places, but it was very rare. It was never our emphasis. It wasn't what we did. We were really active, trying to get, just do different things. We had a confidence about ourselves, but that's a different story. But it really does play into it, because when we were first out, there were no doctors, there were no lawyers. We were all doing it ourselves. We were very, very ordinary people trying to work through these issues as best we could, and we were our own answer. If there was a problem somewhere, we just rushed up and did it, and we didn't know. We got ourselves into trouble many times because we didn't know what we were doing. We had to learn organization, had to learn how to be organized, how to not have a meeting to have a meeting, not to have a meeting and say, well, okay, we're going to have a meeting to have a meeting. It just was ridiculous, the kind of stuff that we had to work through. But we did, and learned to be more efficient. So the meetings we talked about, let's get it out of the way, let's put it in a committee, let's make it work. And Lehigh-Ho was no different than that. The points where we got to the meeting got to be so long that we just had to ultimately get a board and say, okay, the board's going to deal with everything else, and we're going to do presentations at meetings. And that was a year afterwards. It took a while to get the name Lehigh-Ho. It took 6 months of figuring out to get the bylaws and then saying, okay, what are we going to name it? And somebody came up with that, and it was good enough, it was clever enough. And that's good enough, too. As Lehigh-Ho, Lehigh, and L-E-H-I-H-O.
How did that name come about?
Sorry?
How did the name come about?
Somebody suggested it in that committee, and I don't remember who it was. I think I do, but it's not important. In that little committee, and we adopted it. And I think actually there was a person who was called Ron became the executive. What was it called? Damn it! Why can't I think of that? Simple term. And the executive director. He was the executive director. This was different. Now this would be the person who handled the whole group, and there was president too. But Ron would be the person, the go-to person, the person who was responsible. Tell a story about that because it's very revealing about what happened. About a year after that, remember Ron was handling all the stuff that was coming into this wonderful P.O. box of his, and we, he would share out with the board what he wanted us to know, or the group with what he wanted us to know, and so we got these long meetings, all that kind of jazz, and now some of it obviously could have been personal, and some of it was personal because he was dealing with this jazz stuff and so on that I was not dealing with kids that are troubled and so on. At one point, I led a revolution, and I said, "Okay, we want the key here. We want to get the key to the box, and because this is important stuff. But I don't know what's coming in. We don't know what's coming in. I didn't think that he was doing anything wrong with any of it, but I wanted to share it. I wanted to know what's coming in. All this good stuff. We went and had the meeting, and I think 6 or 7 of us went to this meeting, and Ron said no. You can't. They keep it. Well, that was the end of that. But it was what Ron also said was, "I'm going to be here. I founded this group to be here, and I'm going to be here when the rest of you are gone. You can come and go. I'm going to be here." And he was, and that was true. For at least the first 25 years, Ron was around. And I think he was probably wasn't executive director. People did what he probably didn't know. He had the telephone. And about the next year, we decided to have a telephone. Well, it was installed in Ron's house. Ron was the person who answered it. It was under Lee-I-O. It was under homosexual Lee-I-O. And it was under something else. But if you called the phone, that was the house that you got. And he was the person you got. So I think that, I know that there was good stuff coming in there. There were one of the things that concerned me, that I just realized when I was working with the papers again, there was an archivist. There was a person who was taking care of the library and probably whatever else. Okay. Now, at one point, I know that the archivist said there are 309 books in the library, 177 publications of newspapers and so on, and there are numerous articles. That's a big lot. That's a lot. And that was 7 years, that was 1977, so it was 7 years after we had the library founded. It had now grown, it had doubled in size, and it kept growing. And they would publish in the newsletter that this number of books was contributed, this number of books were out, this number of books were taken, and so on and so on. So it was a very, very important function. So when I talk about my pride in it, I really was proud of it, because it was one of the most important things I felt I had ever done, was to gather this library, get it founded, and get it started, and to make the contribution it did. It was very active.
Is it still an ongoing group?
I don't know that. I don't know what happened to the library. The last time I saw the library, I had it in my home just prior to when I left Pennsylvania. At that time, it was some 500 books. I don't know how many it was. They were in cartons. I never counted them personally. And all I had were the books. I didn't have the other parts of it. So I had mentioned the archives earlier. This was important because I think that archived somewhere, and especially there was more stuff. And Lee-Hi-Ho got archived, okay? It was archived in Connecticut Central Connecticut State University Library. And I think 1978, but I'm not 78, 87. And I'm not quite sure of the date, but I know that's where it's archived. It was definitely. And I didn't realize the importance of that, but I think now that the importance was that there was an archivist who was taking care of all these papers, all these organizations from all over the country that were sharing us their newsletters, were taking care of the records for Lee-Hi-Ho, who called, the telephone log. It would be very important what the board did. As a matter of fact, I remember asking at one point the person who was doing the newsletter in 1980. I said, "Are you sending one are you saving one for posterity?" He said, "No." I was very glad. But I think I think that somebody was. I think the Ron probably was. And I just hadn't realized that.
So that was deposited.
So I think that that's deposited, and I think I want to go there. And now, because there were big blanks, for instance, and I up until '79. I'm sorry. I was very active the first year as the newsletter editor. I met my lover, Doodly I.O. He was at the first meeting, and I didn't meet him again until New Year's Eve of 1970. And after that, then newsletters kind of got pretty scarce. I walked out for about 5 years, and I only have a few of them. Now I knew I was more active than that. I mean, I even the newsletters were there. I was mentioning it. I knew I was doing stuff, but I was also involved with this new lover, and simply this is gapped all of a sudden in this timing. That's just kind of odd. It's funny because I was the newsletter editor. You would think that, and I really tried to keep on to things. Big blank. Back to Lehigh-Ho. They really they went to plays in New York. The big deal with that. Very cultured. They sponsored everybody that came through town. Anybody that they could get to come, and they had everybody. They had Albert Ellis. As a matter of fact, it amazed me that they would have this man. But the Unitarian Church had him, and they contributed to it, and also had him address the Lehigh-Ho group. Made movies, or not made movies, but sponsored movies. Did all kinds of their speakers bureau was very, very busy in town. The colleges called them year after year after year after year after year. They had the same classes they went back to. Did all the speaking around, and the library was very, very much used in terms of importance.
Did the group continue to grow?
Yes. Well, the group. I always say that there were always 5 activists, and it was true. And it was true in every organization I belonged to. There were 5 activists who were your core. This was true in the Caucasus. It was true. It was true for Lehigh-Ho. It was, and it would have. They would have 30, 40, 50. They could have there were times when we had parties we had 225 people. But that was not the core. That wasn't what they were there for. And Lehigh-Ho, the distinction that I really wanted to make about Lehigh-Ho was that they took care of themselves. They were a very, very distinctly different group. And I could get mad at them at times, really mad at them, because they had no women involved. And I would talk to them about it, and I couldn't get them to change on it. Just like there's the language, that wasn't their language. They just didn't talk that language. Didn't know that they weren't talking that language.
This is as women's liberation launches and so forth?
I'm sorry?
This is as women's liberation launches and so forth, that you're trying to get Lehigh-Ho to engage women?
No, I'm just trying to get Lehigh-Ho to engage women because women were around.
Because there were lesbians.
Yeah, because there were lesbians, and they should have been. This was a gay group. Well, that was the definition of a gay group. We're all guys, and we're going to do our thing. And they just couldn't see past it, and I couldn't get them past it. I couldn't get them to understand. There was a woman.
Certainly not the only one.
Yeah, that's right. Did you know Lou Augustine? Do you remember Lou? Lou was the woman who went to Lehigh-Ho, and she was the only woman that ever went to Lehigh-Ho with any regularity. They tried to claim Janet Kruger once. Can you believe this? She went to one meeting. There are some wonderful, funny things about that. She went to one meeting, but then there was a note somewhere in the paper afterwards, in one of the newsletters, about the council or somebody has been looking for women. We have a couple that we would suggest. Janet Cooper and Lou Augustine, the 2 women that they could get everything. They couldn't get them to stick, and Lou at least stuck around. Lou was this wonderful recovering alcoholic. I love recovering alcoholics. If anybody in my life, they're just my favorite people because they're so absolutely honest. There's no bullshit with them ever. And so Lou was a recovering alcoholic, but isn't that incredible that they had enough balls? But that's the way it was, and it was that way with so many organizations. Now I think after the caucus, it was 75, when we began to form, when the caucus was formed, and we insisted on equity.
Which
The
this is
council
what
is just
caucus.
the caucus.
What
is
is the caucus?
Okay, the caucus. I'm sorry, the caucus was I don't want to talk about it right now, but it was a group that I really don't want to talk about it because there will be a whole section on the caucus.
Okay.
later on. But it was the inner organization out of all the groups. The Friends Lehigh Ho supported it. Micah supported it. Everybody that we knew supported the organization by both members, sometimes by sending members, sometimes by sending money, sometimes by simply doing whatever you wanted them to do in terms of writing letters and so on. And it was very important, but it was 5 years after the beginning of Lehigh Ho. Lehigh Ho was there all by itself until about 74. All of a sudden, then there were other groups that began to form. But again, Lehigh Ho remained this old-time group all the time, never changed, and took care of itself in all those years that I know of. In terms of social hour, was a very, very important thing. Those guys used to love to come, and they would do any program that you wanted, and it would be on transvestism, theology, and gay. Art Ellis, wonderful, wonderful things, wonderful programs, and they would sit through them, and then they would go off by themselves and have this great time. But they were there for the conversation. They were there because of the alternative bars. It was the way you could meet people, not be on the meat rack, talk to them about sensible things. And so it was I always thought it was a very, very, very important function, and I was
So it functioned as a contrast to the bars.
Oh yeah, in part, absolutely. But that was a conscious choice about it too. And homophiles at least did. They talk about it. They were consciously doing social things as an alternative to bars. Discussion groups in which they were very personal levels were very, very important to everybody. And Lehigh Ho repeated this, that we had to start another discussion group because the last one was so important for a while. And you get people in this, they need to communicate. They do it and they get in there and they communicate with each other and they get these warm groups, and then they're done. Now they've done that thing, and you get that another need comes in, a new group with another need comes in. And so you have to feed that. You have to constantly feed it and constantly renew that group and that excitement. But that was the IO very much is that particular thing. That they took care of themselves. They were an older group. They were the caucus and all the other groups I belonged to were much, much younger. I was by the time Lehigh Ho formed, I was 30.
And that was, that was in the mid-70s?
That would be in the mid-60s. That would be 67.
Oh, right, that's real early.
69. I was 69. That's when I was. I was born in 1940, so it would be 30 by the time Lehigh, almost 30 by the time Lehigh Ho operated, or began to operate. And so I was when it began to be younger people that I was dealing with, like Mary's age Mary was still in college. The people that I knew were all beginning jobs. I always said that unemployment line fed gay liberation, and it did. There's no question about it. That's when people could really be active, and they could stay on. They stayed on unemployment as long as they could, and stayed active in Lancaster, in everywhere. We really built that system accidentally. It's because they were so young and they couldn't hold jobs and didn't stay with jobs. That was particularly important. That they were able to make those contributions, get the time to do it.
Do you recall, was there a reaction to the Evelyn Hooker, research?
I do, because it was hard to find. It took me a while to find that out, and again, I'm studying this stuff afterwards. Okay, I don't remember quite her years, a little before that, and I had to find. Hers was a book I had to find. Homosexual in America was a book I had to find on Webster Corey. The Money Studies were books I had to find. Ford and Beach, who did the cross-cultural studies, were books I had to find. Wainwright Churchill wrote a wonderful book on homosexuals about gay-positive cultures, as opposed to non-gay cultures. I thought it was a wonderful revelation about calling the Greeks a gay-positive and the American culture a gay negative, and the fact that there were these very distinct differences. You could embrace it, or you could reject it, and those cultures were both viable and very much a part of it, but they were choices. as to what you were going to do and what would result if you did it. Well, it was great. It was a very important argument. So many books like that kept coming out. But yes, do I remember able to look at it? I looked it up as soon as I could, and finally, and I don't remember what. Yes, but I was certainly very aware. And what she
was a
you talk about what she had
psychologist,
done?
and she did the study of normal gay men. She found gay men who were
What she did
functional.
was she took the Rorschachs.
And it was, exactly.
Took the Rorschachs
And
and
it
said,
was absolutely
okay, now-
blinding to the APA.
Yeah. Now you tell me which of these people are blind. Well, they couldn't. She said, okay, so it's not a pathology. It's not a pathology. But remember, Freud
It
had
just
said
blew
that.
everything away. It just,
Freud had said that this person is there isn't anything wrong with him. The only thing that's going on with him is he's got this aberration, this homosexual aberration, and outside that he's fully normal, fully human, and fully moral. The moral part was the part that was, I think, was the important part, because that's what we were always disclaimed about. Yes.
you also
Those
said
were
it
very
wasn't,
important.
you weren't going
And
to
they
change
were
it either.
hard, yeah. You have to go back and the Sexology magazine, for instance, which was this magazine literally the sex that was published in the 60s, the free 60s, was a very important basis of a big part of the fight went on in those pages. Fights everywhere, and there were people who were coming out of the closet gradually. They went from virtually zero to some well before 1969, but then the explosion when the Stonewall occurred. That was the big deal. And the Stonewall was that watershed moment when it just simply changed here. They called it the hairpin drop that was heard around the world. It was one of the great descriptions of it. I want to talk about that for just a second, because what really kind of divided is immediately after Stonewall, things began to get, the Gay Liberation Front suddenly bloomed. And the Gay Liberation Front was leftists. No question about the fact that the leftists joined us as in the original, when the Mattachine were communists originally, and one day they just had a meeting and didn't invite them and walked away with the treasury. That was the end. That was literally the end of the leftists. And they gracefully withdrew and said, "This will, for the health of the movement, withdraw." Henry Hay and George, I don't remember his last name, Cooper, maybe. So now there's something, these two groups, this Gay Liberation Front is very, very leftist, and they want you to support everything. They want you to support the blacks and the grape people who are growing grapes in California, the Soledad Brothers, the Chicago Eight, whoever it was a radical who was supposed to be espousing their cause, and lesbians and all the rest of it, and they really became very radical. Now, so they were the first ones out there. They were the first ones who really made a name in New York, and suddenly there were GLFs on college campuses all over higher education, and they don't think they lasted a year. What took their place was called the GAA. Now, this is a group that said, okay, we aren't going to support everybody else. We're going to just do the gay thing. And that's the one that took hold. This is the one that is testified in all these books as the one that succeeded where GLF did not, because they were the moderates. They were the ones who said we will focus on this fight and no others.
So we're talking about early 70s now.
We're talking about 69 and
Now,
so
was
on.
there
Right? As soon as 69, we're talking about the fact that in was it okay? That was written in 70. This was written in 70. 69. Back to 69 for one moment. There was an organization called ECHO, and ECHO was the ERCO, I think it was, the Eastern Region Conference of Homophile Organizations, ERCO. That was the first group, and then they had formed another group called NACO, which is the North American Conference of Homophile Organizations. That became the national representative for several years. I'm not sure when they formed, quite 60s, late in mid 60s. And so ERCO formed in met in '69 in ISA October. I now have 3 dates for it, so I really have to straighten it out. The agreement has one date, I have another date, and the IHO is telling me a third date, so I really don't know which of those three is in fact accurate for the meeting. Not important.
So did a Gay Activist Alliance form as over and against or separate from
We're
the
going to talk
IHO?
about that. Yes, this was separate from the IHO. This was the overall organization arching that had Mattachine and all the groups, the old guard groups, and there were I think 7 of them were the original members, and suddenly they were more than doubled by student groups and by new groups like the GLF, like the GAA, like the and so we went and had this meeting, and this was at a place called Mattachine Place, which was really a gay bar in Philadelphia, kind of sleazy, but it had a second floor that was empty, and a meeting room up there, and it was dust all over the place. They were being used, and we went and had our meeting up there with all these people, and it was very, very, very contentious, between the old guard and the new guard, and about the fact that the old guard wanted to keep the power and say we're going to do things the old traditional way, and we are going to support all these issues. And they had a big fight about it. It was a tremendous fight on the floor about the new people said, we are here, we want to vote. We don't want just an organizational vote, we want to vote for every person that's here. This is democracy. We're here, we're going to vote. Well, of course they didn't quite get that. But there was a tremendous fight about it. And acrimonious that they were calling at one point, this is again, it's before Roe versus Wade, somebody were yelling about Barbara Gaines, a baby killer, because it was an abortion. She favored abortion rights. And, and it was just brutal. And it shocked me. I had no idea what a baby killer was or why she was that. But that was, these people there yelling at the top of their lungs, baby killer, baby killer. It was brutal song. Frank Cavaney was in charge of it. Now, you probably never met Frank, but Frank was a physicist who had been thrown out. Frank Cavaney was.
Yes, I did meet him actually.
Yeah.
Once.
So you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, he was a very stiff, very formal man. Had an accent and he talked like he was learning from God all the time. He just was this wonderfully intelligent person, but he had such tight control, and he was so specific about what he wanted that he just it was hard to know him. It was hard to deal with him because he just delivered from on high. He was in charge of this thing, and he did a good job. But my God, we were talking about Robert's Rules of Order down to the fine lines about what's precedent. But one of the divisions of that came out was that they had demonstrations, first demonstrations that had ever been. One in the White House. This was Frank Cavaney in front of the White House, and got about maybe 10 or 15 people in '63, I think it was, and that was his important contribution. And then the next year, I think they said we want to do more, so they what they called the Day of Remembrance. On the 4th of July, they all went to the Liberty Bell and marched there. And again, that was the same number of people. But Frank said, we will all wear suits. And he insisted on this, because if we don't, we aren't going to be accepted ever. And of course, these people came in and they said, we've got our glad rags. And they were colorful. They had leather vests and red shirts and just really and glad rags. They were just happy people. And they were mad about the fact that people had come to the Day of Remembrance and been turned away because they weren't properly dressed. They didn't have suits and ties. They didn't wear skirts.
We have to stop.
We need to change tape.
Yeah.
Going back over the highlights of the thing has been a very distinct. But they belong to that. They belong to the timeline. They may not necessarily belong to this. To characterize the older group, what I wanted to do with them. They were more mature. The IHO was always more mature, and they did more mature things, and handled themselves very much more responsibly, and lasted a lot longer than anybody else by doing what they did. had more money. They had a better newsletter. They just everything was better. Mary talked about the fact that we used this old spirit, the old spirit, purple. That was what I had. I got that from work, and I stole it from work, and our newsletters. That was a revolution. I mean, you could make a revolution from on a mimeograph machine. Is what I thought, and it really was true. I mean, then Xerox came along. They weren't quite as useful, but boy, we sure could have used the copier. Let me tell you, we had to write the scripts.
Pretty astonishing what we have now.
Somebody did that. NIPCA, Northeastern Pennsylvania Geog Association, did all theirs on Xerox, and it was just plain crazy because the stuff is got that funny feel to it. It's faded and it got black all over it, and you cut it out. You just kind of cut it off wherever you wanted to. It was just a mess, and he didn't date anything. It's hard to read you over did. That was different. Okay. We are on. We're talking about ERCO, because this was a conference that there was this gigantic fight going on about Old Guard and New Guard, and the fact that they were so young, as composed to other people who were older. I mean, clearly Frank Kennedy was in his 50s, Barbara Giddings was older, and Foster Gunnison was a very stiff man. He was an organization all by himself. He was the archivist for the whole early gay movement. He started running the Mattachine and became the archivist, and he kept all these wonderful newsletters that he kept all. That's what he did. That was his function. He thought was to do that, and in a group called the Institute of Social Ethics in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a single member of it, but he got his own vote. Okay, in like ERCO. Well, that certainly pissed people off. Like the young people were there, very different feelings, and let's do all these things. So one of the battles that I was talking about was this Day of Remembrance, and the fact that they wanted to do some sort of memorial every year, and people were mad because the young people were mad because they couldn't participate in their own clothes. They just didn't want to pay attention to this dress thing. If you came, you marched. It was in happily. So the compromise that came on Sunday morning. Sunday morning, and this is just a piece of paper that I have somewhere that has. The proposal was to make a Christopher Street Memorial March for the Stonewall. Plain sheet of paper. But that was the beginning of the Christopher Street. Now this had gone on. As I now know, it had been planned by a fellow by the name of Craig Rodwell for a long time, but wanted to do this Christopher Street Commemoration Day is what he originally thought of, but he was never able to enable it until 3 or 4 months later. When we started this ERCO convention, I remember this is just 3 months after the Stonewall. This thing just exploded in everybody's face so fast that Mattachine was simply out. And I remember going to Craig Rodwell's shop. He owned the Oscar Wilde bookstore. It opened up just probably sometime before, just months before that. And the world's first gay bookstore that we knew of. And I went to there because that was where I could find the books that I could ever find. So I went in, and there were these young people in there, and they're talking about Mattachine. Well, I'm listening to a question. I'm an eavesdropper, but they're letting me know that you're an old guy and you really don't belong here. Okay, this, and they're talking about Mattachine, this old line, and we don't like Mattachine and all that kind of stuff. Look at me. You understand. And I went up to the desk, and I picked up all these books, these wonderful books that I found in this collection. I took them up to the desk, and he said, "That's the lending library. You can't buy those books as the ones that we lend out to people on for money. So you can't. They weren't for sale." But that was Craig Rodwell. That was how I met Craig Rodwell, And,
That bookstore
and he
just
kind
closed
of
recently.
gave me that sheepish look about, you understand that, I was obviously a stranger. He was the one who definitely knew that I wasn't New York, that I wasn't, and I think that's probably when I went to meet Mattachine the first time. Just after the Stonewall, I'm sure, that I went to the door and met Nikolai and said, and saw the library that they had. Amazing, it's right in front of the office, all these steel shelves, and this kind of took my breath away. But that's again, that was my proud moment. Yes, thank you. Keep talking on that. Where am I at?
So what issued from Echo? What issued from Echo? You had a very real struggle.
We're talking about the fact that they wanted to start this Christmas tree demonstration, okay? And it was a radical idea. I mean, we didn't know what to do. There hadn't been anything like it quite. It was to be open to everybody. It was an odd date, too. Did we really want to commemorate the Stonewall? Some people did and some people didn't. But again, it had been this big deal. We knew that. So we went away and we did it. The first thing we got home, and Lehigh Ho said, okay, we are going to support Christmas tree demonstrations, and we are going to support the resolutions from ERCO. This was the center. Well, okay. They changed their mind the next month, which I'd really forgotten about. But what's funny about that is that a year later, when in fact they did do the Christmas tree demonstration in March, then Lehigh Ho was very, by then they had changed their mind and they had said we will support it. But when it came down to it, I think there were 4 people there at this march, okay, that I knew of. I was there with Fred Reed, and Fred was the vice president of the organization. Okay, this is Gay Pride. This was 1970. This is the issue of the Gay Pride papers. This was the issue of the Advocate on the Gay Pride marches that had taken place. And there were 3 or 4 of them, I think. There was one in Providence, one in Chicago, one in Los Angeles, or whatever. And but the big one had been in New York. And I just thought it was so ironic that they said they didn't want to do it, but when it came down to claiming that they had been there, now they wanted to claim that they had been there. Yeah. So I want to show you. I have to show you this picture. This is. Okay, it's down there, the one with Lehigh Ho. Homosexual's not a 4-letter word. And if you look at the guy sitting there holding the sign, that's my bald head. At the back, turned around the other way.
Is that you? All right.
That's me, so I was there, okay? I'm part of history.
All that black hair.
Yeah, with black hair, back in those days. And my lover was standing up. My lover was there beside me, and Fred Reed is there. And the other person that marched was I don't know if that was a girl or not, but she marched with us. We met her in New York. Ricky and I had gone into New York, and we were at the start of this march down in Sheridan Square. And she came along and said, I see that you guys are holding the sign from Bethlehem. I'm from Bethlehem too. So she saved the day with us. But I've forgotten her name, sadly. I don't know. But I do know that the 3 of us, and Lehigh Ho, of course, got very proud. And so this picture is now in their collection at in Connecticut. There were a whole series of pictures. This was not the only picture taken, but this sign was even hit. It's in Stonewall. It's in here.
Cool.
Yeah. This sign was one of the ones that we're proud to cover.
I mean, this is the first period when people are letting their pictures be taken at such things.
Well, okay, now let's talk about that day. That day is terribly important. We went and went down to Sheridan Square on the way down, going on the subway, which I was relatively well enough to get around. I saw somebody who was going to bring lunch. I tried to get to know him all. It kind of didn't work. But we got off and found Sheridan Square, and then we met her. But we're down there about maybe a half an hour beforehand. I'm not sure, maybe an hour beforehand. Lots of things are going on. The people are milling around. There's a whole block of people. We're contained in a block. We're waiting for the parade right in front, right at the Stonewall. Not at the Stonewall. The Stonewall's around the corner. Actually. We were in Sheridan Square, and lots of things going on. People taking pictures all over Hill and Creation. Now, a lot of those people, and we knew this, were FBI. Okay, they were definitely, and it was proven later on, and they admitted later on that they had been investigating the whole homophile movement when I was young, and yes, it came out and was known and published in the papers. So we knew that was going on, and Ms. was there, and so I was running around saying, "This is an historic day. Who are you? What are you here for?" You answered the question. You talked to everybody, but you also knew that some of these people were the opposition, were the FBI or whoever wanted in the New York police and so on. Mattachine was there, and I remember looking at them. It was Nick Leish and a fellow by the name of Austin Wade. Austin Wade was this great lawyer. Doesn't he sound like Marble Halls? Austin Wade was the lawyer. I was so impressed by that. It wasn't his real name. Okay, like everything else, he was supposed to be in the closet. Frank Cameron always said that his group was in the closet. One of the funniest things that I ever saw. And so Sam Frank looked up Mattachine, Washington. Frank is insisting that everybody that was in the organization was in the closet but Frank. Frank could be the spokesperson. He was the only person in the thing that could talk about it. His vice president couldn't remember the pseudonym that he was supposed to use. The board members couldn't remember the pseudonyms they were supposed to use their names. It's right behind Doc. Frank talking to me about the fact that he was the only one. He was never the only one, but Frank always believed he was because he wanted to be. He was a wonderful man, but he was so wrong sometimes and so stubborn about it. But he did get what he was after. He got we got rights to have security clearances and to join the service, which he would have been very proud of. He didn't live that long, but he did learn to see security clearances. Would have been very proud, and that was his fight. And he really did a number on it. So we're at New York, milling around, and we know this is all happening, and GLF is there. They're going to lead the parade because they're the most out people. Mattachine is there with these nice little signs that say Mattachine. They were very pretty. I think they were red and gold, if I recall. And there were maybe 50 of them. I'm not sure how many there were that they had handed out. And then, of course, my sign. And very few others. There were no bands. There was nothing around here. We're just this bunch of people milling around. Maybe some hundreds. We don't know how many. Hard to count because everybody we're just interacting. We're just going around, doing our thing. So the parade starts, and we start up the street. And this is amazing. I mean, this is the most wonderful thing that you can think of, doing this marching business of starting out and echoing off the buildings about gay power. 2468. How do you know your husband's straight? That's one that I especially appreciated when we went past the New York Hotel. And all these rich people are up there with their limousines and this kind of jazz, and there we are going by saying, "How do you know 2468? How do you know your husband's straight?" Just really enjoying ourselves. Same when we got to the cathedral. I mean, how do you know your priest is straight? The St. Patrick's Cathedral, and that was always a big moment when we got to St. Patrick's Cathedral, and everybody was really cheering and trying to give the bishop what for, the archbishop what for. But
Were you picking up people as you went?
There weren't very many people starting out, and a lot more spectators were watching who weren't going to join. They would come down to be with their friends, to support their friends, and they didn't start out with us. Okay, and so the big cry was off the sidewalks into the streets. We really wanted, please come out and join us. And that was what I thought was the most important cry of the day for me, was to get people to join us. And we started out in this very silent group of people, just yelling and making all the noise we could. In New York, that's not a whole noise, but we felt very brave about it, and we were on one lane, okay, of traffic. And I don't think we were maybe a block long when we started out. We just fit within that traffic lane. And we started up, and people kept coming along the sidewalk and joining us. But they weren't coming onto the street, they were coming along the sidewalk. So we got the tremendous flow way up the street of people who were participating and people who weren't participating. And we marched for quite a while, and I remember getting out of line finally. I needed something to drink. Got out of line. And realized all of a sudden that now we're 5 blocks long. Just that many more people. And I think I did it again, and now we're 8 blocks long, and it was just... It was so exciting. Instantly, people are flying right along with us up the street, and we went up 60 blocks, I think, was the measure of the walk, I think. So it was a long way. It may not have been that far. I don't remember. I don't know how far it is within its points, but somebody said 60 blocks. I know it was a long way that day. It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but we started a little late. And we got into Central Park, and you went past all those wonderful benches where you see people in the curves and all that kind of jazz. And went to a place called the Sheep Meadow, which is this great big area out there in the middle. And we went clear across the Sheep Meadow. And at this point, there wasn't anything else going on. I mean, we got across the Sheep Meadow, and we were allowed to be there. We'd had a permit to be there, and we were on this rise. And we turn around, and there are 11. There's all these people. Going out to it. And it just was so amazing, so amazing. And I always talk about that as the beginning of the movement. That's when we knew how successful we were. And Lee Idaho claimed that day. They got that picture, and they got some other pictures that they show now on their in the web page in Connecticut, which tickles me because they were against it. And I always thought, take that, wonderful. Good story, I always thought. But that was, I think there were, officially there may have been 2,000. Really, there may have been 2,000. And that was the biggest of the parades across the country. And it was, certainly the turning was the most amazing thing. And I think that it renovated. Now, there had been earlier things that could have. There had been early demonstrations. There was a demonstration in 1960, for instance, in 61, I think, that could have been the stone wall. It wasn't. There have been other occasions which could have been as important, but that was the one that really congealed, I think, and said, we are powerful. We are going to win. And we knew at that moment. We are now historical. We are a historical fact. We've won just by being out here. And so the rest of it's just kind of, footnotes to history for me, in a sense. I've always been confident about the fact that the right is on our side. We knew what we were doing, we were successful already. Very, very powerful feeling. And you know, when New York was always renewal. Every year I went, I would just, you know, you'd come away from that and you'd go walk around Central Park holding hands. You couldn't do anything else. But that day we just sat down and there were no speeches, there was nothing going on. And we just kind of cried for a while and sat there and talked. There was nothing else to do. But, you know, had our little game for hours, I think, just enjoying the simple peace of what had happened and the joy of it. And walked away from there. You just couldn't help yourself. I held Ricky's hand and we kissed when we wanted to and liberated the park. Went away from it every year. And it was that kind of rejuvenating experience every time I went to it. I always say that people, you know, when he talked about the fact that gay pride, when I talked about the fact that gay pride would hit people hard, that's why. Because I saw that numbers of times with gay pride people. We are very unneat when we do parades. We crowd in. We get, you know, we like to see them right up close. We want to get there and touch with them. That's an amazing feeling walking down with a press of people like that. You just, and your friends, the people who, the love and the support is just so incredible. Everywhere you find it. I marched in Pittsburgh. There were 40 one time. I think the first march in Pittsburgh was 40. The Philadelphia parade that we have the picture from. Went to New York for years and years. I don't remember when the last went. And I would love to go again. I think just to see what the differences were. But they were always amazing. And New York offered again that all those other characters that were always transvestites who were somebody who went up and down the streets on roller skates. Very, very famous character who did that weekends. That was what they did. And the fight was always about, look at those, they're stealing all our thunder. Well, hell, they were supposed to. We should have been very proud of them. We should have been fighting for them and saying, yeah, go do it, get out there and do our speeches. We didn't feel that way. And you couldn't find, and again, I talked about the male organizations, they excluded them. They didn't mean to, but they certainly were never hospitable to them. They came around. The one crisis that I do remember in the IHO was we had somebody came from in drag one time. And when he came in drag, he brought a young boy with him. Well, we want to tell you, a lot of nervous men. You ought to see that group. They were very nervous because we're all over 35, and we've got this kid there with us. Never had happened before. Nobody had ever brought them. So the next time I think the kid came, the guy came. He didn't without the kid in drag, and he wanted to endorse NAMBLA. North American Boy Love Association. You know what happened with that. But that was the IHO. They turned down everything. They turned down NAMBLA. They turned down anything. There was an underground newspaper that supported them in Allentown. And underground newspapers just suddenly sprouted in the 60s and 70s because of the alternative to the news. They aren't telling us the truth, so we're going to tell you the truth. And the truth had a slant to it. Very definite slant, but it was what they saw, and they were the IHO would support the newspaper that supported them. It was that kind of thing that made me mad because it just was the character of them. But they were conservative. They knew they wouldn't do it. It wasn't their style, and they made very firm decisions about it. Recorded them, and so nobody ever endorsed NAMBLA. That wasn't a bad decision. Even I had to go with that one. And said we protect itself. We have to not do this again. Yeah, it's good not to come again, and certainly never to bring another boy.
Well, Joe, I'm thinking this is a good place to pause.
I do too. I got through to what I wanted to say.